Okay. So this is hard to read, but here is my hello world. Okay. So that's what everybody set up. Okay. And so I've opened up hello world. And so what I can do is I can right click on it and I can go copy. And then over here, I right click and I'm going to go paste. And then it says, hey, I want to call it Hello World 2. And I said, no, really, I want to call it GPIO, for instance, and use default location, which should be wherever this one is, and I'll copy it all over. Okay. So I should have GPIO. Now, if I open up here, expand on this one, let me just close all of these guys. Go close all. Okay. And so if you, this is under GPIO, there is hello world.ioc. It didn't rename that properly, and it's going to get messed up. And there's a hello world.debug launch and things. So I need to rename the hello world.ioc to GPIO. I'll take the hello world debug launch, rename, and we'll just call it GPIO, and that's it for the debug launch, I think. Hard to see if I've got something deleted there. Hopefully it's fine. Okay. Now, when you do that, then I'm on this one, and then I want you to right click and I want you to go clean project. That gets rid of all the links, deletes all the object files, anything that referenced the old one. And it should actually go back and rebuild. But then I will go and just go build project, and hopefully it will do everything I did before. Okay. And then, so if I go GPIOC, hopefully it'll bring it up. Okay. So hopefully just like you had last week's lab. So your main.c, everything is there. Okay. But now it's in a new project. So you should still be able to go. Whenever you have multiple projects, over here on the left-hand side, you need to be clicked and be in the right project. Sometimes if you have multiple things open, close them all, go into your project, go into, for instance, your core here, and make sure that the main.c that you're working on is the one from your project and not from the one of your project last week and stuff. I've had a number of times where people have been going, it's just not working. I take a semicolon off, try and compile, it all compiles fine because you're not compiling the stuff that you were actually working on, right? So sometimes you need to just go, okay, try and force an error, try and do something if things aren't being what you think they are. Okay, so I've got that. It's over on my new project. And then if we go over to our GPIO here, now let's see if I can hopefully expand out. Where did we say this thing was? Our button? Anybody? A0? Okay, so when I click there, and then I'm going to go, oh, there's a lot to pick from. Yeah. Any guesses? Okay, GPIO input. Okay, and then I'm going to call it something. That's right click and I go user label and I'm going to call it button. Okay. And then so I'm going to just go save. And when you save, it should be rebuilding. And it says operation. So it's just generating new code. And that I called it button. So in main.h, you'll see a reference to button being PA0. Okay. And also the port. So now that I have that, I will go down here and I'll do something, let's say, system clock, GPIO net. Oh, here's that stuff that I had. How GPIO right from last time. But if I wanted to do something and I go how GPIO and I go control space, it looks at all the API stuff that's available with how GPIO. And so I have GPIO init, external interrupts, init, lock, read pin, toggle pin, write pin is some of the options. And so I just have to pick the one that I want. Okay. And so if it was a button, it would be read pin, for instance. Or if it's write, for instance, because I had the write pin. And so let me just go to a write pin for a second here. And so when I go write pin, it says GPIO-X, and up top it goes, hey, it's void HAL GPIO write pin, GPIO type def is GPIO-X, and we looked at the manual and it said X is anything from A to H or whatever. But we also know that there in main.h, it will put a link to whatever kind of that is. What was the names of the LEDs? Do you guys remember what we called the LEDs? Red LED, for instance. So if I go red and go control space, oops, was it? Capital R, thank you. Darn, see. So you have red LED. So it says, hey, out of this red, there's a port and a pin. Well, it wants here, it wants the port, and then it wants a pin, and it wants a pin state as well. So then I can just select it. Okay. So it tries to help you. It has that IntelliSense stuff. And so you type a couple words, go control space. Sometimes it doesn't understand and it gets a little bit confused because IntelliSense and the compiler are two different things. And so I've had, for instance, sometimes people write code and it has a whole bunch of little exclamation marks or red things going, it doesn't understand, but it compiled fine. And that's because the compiler saw everything was working right. And sometimes IntelliSense takes a little bit to catch up. Sometimes a save or a compile and all those kind of errors will go away. If it compiled and gave you no errors, then it's good. It could also tell you about it has never seen something before. Like you could call, it would say implicitly defined something. That means you haven't defined it, and it's going to guess that you're calling a function that returns an int, okay, which may or may not be true. Okay, if you ever see those, they're warnings. It'll usually let you pass with some of those kind of things. Okay, so that's when I use HAL GPIO. So if I did a HAL, what was it, GPIO, and for reading my button, what would I want? Control space. It's really hard to read this one, I know. But we have a HAL GPIO read pin. I'll try and get my my fonts and stuff to be bigger for next time. And what did we call the? It was just button, wasn't it? Button. So there's button port, and so I'll do. I will do that one, and then we'll replace. It says GPIO pin, so I'll go button pin. Okay, so that kind of looks okay, only it returns, it said a state. And so you could, for instance, it's an enumerated type of either GPIO set or reset state, or GPIO pin set or reset. So you could say if this equals GPIO pin set, do something. These return a 1 and a 0 in the enumerated type. So you could just make it an int or something or a char and then say, you know, have go int button value and then say button value equals this. and then say, if button value, go clockwise, if else, go counterclockwise, or something like that. Okay. So hopefully, now let me just comment that out for a sec, and let me compile this. Incidentally, when you go and compile and do, for instance, you're going to debug and things, it comes up and says stuff like, do you want to reset perspective? Or, sorry, do you want to always do this the same time? And so, do you want to change perspective? And there's a little checkbox that says, do you want to remember that for next time? It keeps coming up and saying, do you want to change perspective? You want to kind of save that so you don't have to keep clicking that away. What it's trying to tell you is there are different configurations. And when I'm going to go debug, do you want to see all the windows that make it helpful to debug? Yes, generally yes. And so you don't want it to keep asking you every time. So change over to the different screen orientations for that mode. Then when you go over to do the editor, even when I go from the IOC file to graphic, it says, hey, when we compile or generate the C code, do you want to put it into C code window mode? Yes. And don't keep asking me, just do it. Okay. And so if you click that little box that says don't keep asking me, it'll put it into the right modes for the different things. Yep.
The different user code sections, those just there for our convenience, or should we actually put specific parts of the code?
Oh, over in here?
No, in the comments. The comments
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, yeah. Um, you have to put your code between the user begins and the user ends. So I put my code, it says user begin while, user end while. My code went in here. If you don't put it there and you change anything in the IOC file, the graphical environment, and I go, for instance, I only have the blue LED. Let's say then I had to go back and add the red LED or the green LED or something like that. The moment it generates new code, it wipes out everything not between the begin and ends. So I've had people go, I was sure I put it between, and it will wipe it out. Okay, so that's a really good point. Your code needs to go between those, and it's a way of it allowing it to modify code that you've been modifying. Okay, we'll leave it there. We'll continue on and go through some of the debugging features next day. Thank you very much.